Welcome to the Art of Healing podcast, the podcast that is dedicated to helping you connect with your mind, body, and spirit. This is Charlize, physician and Reiki master, and thank you so much for joining me. I would like to remind you that although I'm a physician, the information you receive in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. You can find my full disclaimer at my website, www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. If you like what you hear on this podcast, sign up for my weekly newsletter. Check your show notes for more information and for the link to sign up. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode for the second week of January, which is going to be using meditation to reduce unwanted habits. And in this podcast, we're going to discuss the difference between a bad habit and an addiction. We're going to actually talk about what risky substances, things that could be harmful to our health, are. Before we get too much into the topic, I want to first of all assert that if you are dealing with what you believe could be serious addiction, or you're concerned, or you feel that you really need help, that if you're in the United States, you do have help. The 1-800 number for the National Helpline for Addiction is 1-800-662-4357. So if you happen to be listening to this and you're in a really scary place, I would encourage you, of course, to listen, but I will also encourage you that there is no judgment. Please seek help. Often the month of January can be a month that triggers those that have history of addiction or maybe risk of relapsing. So just wanted to acknowledge, if that's where you are, that you don't have to be there alone. So please seek help. I want to share a lesson or a quote from A Course in Miracles. The author is Dr. Helene Schuckman. In these show notes and everywhere you're listening, I'll make sure to put links to A Course in Miracles. If you don't have a copy or haven't studied this, I have been working my way through A Course in Miracles for over a year. Full disclosure, it is a year's worth of daily lessons, and I am definitely at the towards the end. But A Course in Miracles, if you're not aware of it, is daily lessons that start you as a student, then eventually as a teacher in miracles, essentially. So for this topic, I thought it would be nice to share a lesson that I happen to come across as I'm recording this. So this is going to be lesson 243 from A Course in Miracles. Today, I will judge nothing that occurs. I will be honest with myself today. I will not think that I already know what must remain beyond my present grasp. I will not think I understand the whole from bits of my perception, which are all that I can see. Today, I recognize that this is so. I am so relieved of judgments that I cannot make. Thus, I do free myself and what I look upon to be in peace as God created us. Father, today, I leave creation free to be itself. I honor all its parts in which I am included, which are one because each part contains your memory and truth must shine in all of us as one. This quote is directly from A Course in Miracles, and I will put all of the links for that in the show notes. But I thought this was a nice inspiration for discussing reducing things that we don't want, risky habits, or even addiction, just to remind us that, we don't need to judge. As we're working with these things, we really want to approach this in a loving manner. If you are somewhat acquainted with me or have maybe looked at any of the other information about me, like my podcast, some of my social media, I'm a practicing physician, and I recently decided to pursue some training in lifestyle medicine. So I've been studying with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, hopefully become certified soon. And reason why I was so happy the opportunity came up at a time in my medical practice in which I really craved and needed tools to help my patients, my people, and myself beyond just our prescriptions, beyond our usual recommendations, which we need. We do need those in medicine. But it's been really nice to have a paradigm, the training, information on the evidence and the research behind every moment of our lives, how to live healthier, to see and feel and live the life that we want. In lifestyle medicine, there are 6 major pillars that are approached, 6 pillars of health that are healed in order to reverse disease. The 6 pillars cover pretty much every aspect of our life. One of those pillars is the one we're going to be covering, which is risky substances. Risky substances are described as habits, substances, activities that can create harm. The risky substances in the lifestyle medicine paradigm also tend to be substances that are going to have an addictive nature. And we're also crossing into what could be somewhat of addiction science. In lifestyle medicine, we consider any risky substance as something that could bring harm. But classically, those are thought of as what we always think of as risky substances is tobacco or smoking. As far as how much tobacco or smoking are allowed, unfortunately, really none. There's not really a safe amount. So as a habit or an activity or a substance is something we don't want. The second is alcohol. Alcohol, there actually is somewhat of a safe amount, which depending on your background, your body, your brain, that could even vary. In general, in medicine, we usually say that's going to be 1 standard drink for women a day and 2 standard drinks for men every day. And that's based on body mass size, the liver. However, if you have a history of addiction to anything, I typically advise my patients that there isn't likely a safe level of alcohol due to the nature of the chemical, what it does to our brain. And for those individuals, they maybe should not drink. Some individuals who have a strong family history of addiction, particularly alcoholism, also choose to just completely avoid alcoholic substances so as not to tempt the brain. The next unhealthy substance could be, and this is where it gets a little bit harder because, what is a safe amount? But I just sort of lump them into sort of unhealthy foods. So these will be the foods, and the way that I share this with my patients, these are the foods that bring you back for more. And we all know what they are. So if it's salty, if it's sweet, if it makes you crave, if it's something that you'll reach for very quickly and it's easily available, it's probably falling in the realm of an unhealthy food. So what foods fit that classification? So of course, like the salt, crunchy, crispy of potato chips, the sweet of candy, the sweet and comforting feeling of a really heavily flavored coffee drink from your local coffee stand that maybe has lots of syrups. The unhealthy foods gets harder to classify, and I guess at some point I should probably break that down some more. But when I'm working with my patients that are diabetic, in particular, what I'll tell them is we're talking about what foods are in their diet is if it's something you eat and it makes you want more right away, then we want to question if it's not falling in that category and if we even want it in your diet. Beyond the chemicals or foodstuffs that we can put in our body, I also consider certain behaviors to fall in that classification of risky substance. Although they're not a substance, they're a behavior. But these are things that could have addiction potential in someone's brain if they're susceptible to this. And these include things like gambling, excessive shopping, sex, collecting materials. I mentioned excessive shopping because some years ago, I've been in a couple of practices where I conducted home visits. And although I've practiced for many years, I didn't understand the behavior of shopping, collecting, what can sometimes clinically be called hoarding related to OCD, how that shows up in a person's life until I began to do home visits. And I noticed a very strong correlation between people suffering from chronic pain and a tendency to shop beyond their needs or purchase things that push their finances to the limit. And I'm sure a psychiatrist is much wiser than me in this topic would shed some insight on that. It was just my first time to really notice that strong correlation of the habit of sometimes what we call hoarding or collecting, and that association, because I was seeing these, patients for clinical needs with being in severe pain. So these risky substances habits are things that we want to be mindful of. And then, of course, we want to maybe look at if there's something we need to put a limit on or put them in check, possibly eliminate them from our lives. So what is the difference between an addiction, which can be a serious threat to our health and our minds, and a bad habit? So it's not so great. Maybe you need to reduce it. So the American Society of Addiction Medicine defines addiction as a treatable chronic medical disease involving complex interactions among the brain circuits, genetics, the environment, and an individual's life experience. People with addiction use substances or engage in behaviors that become compulsive and often continue despite harmful consequences. So when we're talking about addiction, the difference between that and a bad habit is something we don't like, doesn't help us, it's bothersome. And a bad habit such as sitting too often, not engaging in physical activity, frequently purchasing an unhealthy snack food from the place you buy gas. It's not good, and long-term could lead to some health consequences. But the difference between that and an addiction is the addiction really creates negative pathways in the brain that are very powerful. Often described to my patients that the biochemical workings of the brain have been hijacked so that much of the mental, physical, and unfortunately even spiritual resources within that person become directed at obtaining the substance that's the object of the addiction, and that the use of the substance will persist despite harm. So this is, for instance, someone who has started drinking maybe 5 to 6 drinks a night, and they notice in the mornings, they sleep very badly. In the mornings, they wake up and they're nauseous and throwing up and have a headache. And then yet they return to the drinking 5 to 6 drinks the next night and the next night. So this is not bad behavior. It's not you're a bad person. This is actually biochemical changes within the brain that drive that person to consume that substance. The same neural pathways are being affected in habits such as smoking. And this is what gets into a gray line, but even sugar addiction for my patients that, which I love to catch people well before this happens. But unfortunately, being that I practice internal medicine, I'm first working with someone once they are diabetic. Preferably, we want to be having this discussion before the blood sugars are running high and they're really diabetic. Addiction to sugar can actually be as powerful as any drug. And once that happens, people find themselves wanting to snack on sugary things when they're not hungry or even when they're stressed, or it becomes like a stress reliever. And that really requires some empathy to approach. because that's a habit that really is kind of an addiction because it can lead to negative consequences in the health, becoming diabetic, becoming seriously diabetic, having damage to the organs. And one that we don't have the right language to discuss in clinical medicine, if someone has a sugar addiction and what it's doing to them, how that sugar intake is affecting their mood and affecting their sleep. And it's so easy to judge negatively. It's so easy to judge, but it really needs to be in the same classification as other dangerous chemicals. If someone's going through this, that they actually need help. They need help getting through this. So addiction versus bad habit is basically addiction's going to be really hijacking the brain chemistry so that there's no turning back unless we have a formal treatment plan. We've got to treat it medically. Whereas a bad habit, something we want to reduce. It's still going to require work, but we just want to reduce how much we're doing it. So, of course, if you're dealing with addiction, I will hope that this is a new place for you to arrive, you're questioning that something may be an addictive pattern in your life, I pray that you reach out and get the appropriate help you need, because you will likely require medical help. And although addiction has taken on all sorts of emotional flavors in society, flavors in families where it's often easy to look away, not want to see it, that wherever you are, you will likely require some medical assistance, and that you should be prepared that if you ask for help from your physician, that your physician's often waiting to offer that help. So if that's where you are, of course, I do pray that you seek the appropriate help that you need. For all of us, it is helpful to know that meditation can play a role if you're starting your recovery or treatment, if you're already in it, if you're planning on ways to prevent yourself from relapsing. And of course, meditation can actually help us to divert our attention away from the habits that we don't want. So how this is, I will put links to some of my posts on what's called the autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system is a part of your body, your nervous system, that's actually running the show as far as your organs. The autonomic nervous system is the background programming that's constantly running. Although we as humans tend to feel like we are running things with the front of our brains or the frontal lobes, or where we originate our conscious thought, it's going to be starting from the lower parts of the brain, what's called the brainstem, which will eventually form the roots of what's called the vagus nerve, that through different channels, one called the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, that are going to run things such as your heart rate, how fast you're breathing, how effectively you're breathing, your body temperature. This vagus nerve is going to have strong input on the endocrine system, or your glands or your hormones. So this vagus nerve is going to connect to your adrenal glands, to your ovaries or testes. So when we meditate, we are actually heavily influencing this autonomic nervous system. It is a big topic. If you want to learn more about that, I'll put in the show notes some information about the autonomic nervous system. But when we meditate, what we're doing is we're activating what's called the parasympathetic nervous system. So we like this because this is the part of our nervous system that helps us sleep. It helps us to digest our food really well. It helps us to have a healthy sex drive, as well as to have healthy and satisfying sexual intercourse. It's the parasympathetic nervous system that we want to be conducting our body during most of the time. You do need the other one, the fight or flight, or the sympathetic nervous system, in times of needing fast action reflexes in order to avoid an imminent threat. But we don't always need it. So when we meditate, we're actually encouraging more activity in the parasympathetic nervous system. Immediately when you first meditate and during the meditation, the parasympathetic nervous system is being stimulated right in the moment. But then we also have lots of research to tell us that the more that you're able to return to this habit, the parasympathetic tone or activity becomes much stronger day to day to day. And that the more that you're able to engage in this activity, you're likely to notice that it works better and better without you consciously thinking about it. So how that helps with our habits. One of the things that we know with bad habits and or addiction is that there's typically an emotional trauma that runs with it. So for all of us, I can't even excuse, we all have some kind of habit that may have been tied into soothing an anxious feeling. A common one is when we're after an interaction with someone that was very stressful, a meeting or an argument or some kind of exchange, that will feel edgy. And to reduce the edginess, we grab for a snack and eat. And so an unhealthy way of calming the nerves in the moment that can lead to a bad habit is a snacking from feeling agitated after emotional exchanges. What does that do for us? The reason why we eat at that time, or maybe even eat during boredom, is the function of chewing and swallowing and food hitting the stomach will activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So oddly enough, in that moment, you're not actually wanting to eat because you want to eat. You're actually eating because you're wanting to stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system and you're wanting to calm yourself down. We all do this. I do it. We all do it. So sometimes just kind of shining a light on that and realizing that rather than reaching for the food, maybe what we're needing is a deep breath or a sip of water, or to step away from the thing that's causing that. It may be time for a break, and maybe the problem does not have the solution right now. You don't have it, so you step away and come back to it. So when we're activating that parasympathetic nervous system, meditation is a safe and healthy way to do it. The practice of meditation and mindfulness can help us in dealing with bad habits or addiction by creating the space in the mental and physical and metaphysical practice of observation and awareness. So here are 4 questions that we can all ask ourselves in terms of a habit we're wanting to decrease or an addiction we're wanting to heal. Here's 4 simple questions that we can use as sort of a mindfulness practice. And the initial pass through of these questions, you don't even have to answer them. When I do this with myself and when I do this with my patients, sometimes I say, let's not even answer the questions. Let's just ask them and then leave silence and then maybe return the next day and then maybe attempt to answer them. And maybe return several days in a row and continue to answer the questions. So question number 1, why this habit? Why smoking? Why drinking? Why snacking on candy? The second question is, why now? Why did I pick up the cigarette and light it now? Why did I snack on donuts last night? The third question is, how did I feel before? And the fourth and last question is, how do I feel after? Depending on where you are in your journey, those 4 simple questions may bring up really powerful answers, or there may be no answer, or you don't have to answer them. But the idea is that we're going to start the practice of observing, even just observing the challenges of observing. And we want to practice the awareness. so that you ask those questions, you might become aware of certain emotions or physical sensations. But when we're doing this is really teeny tiny. We're not trying to make huge progress. We're just simply opening the door to the next steps, and we're just shining a light on what's there. Because the one thing that runs between bad habits and addiction, and this is for all of us, is that as the activity is in the background and then it happens, and then after it happens, we don't have awareness of what's happening to us. We just barrel on through it and go on to the next thing. So we're simply just slowing down and asking, why this? Why now? How did I feel before, and how did I feel after? So now that we've covered bad habits and addiction and what those look like and feel like, and how we can set the paradigm internally to create space to deal with those. If you already have a meditation practice, maybe just making sure that your habit's nice and strong so that you know to return to it somewhat automatically, is a gentle reminder. And I'm a meditation student myself, that if we can't get in our 20 minutes a day, which is clinically what's been shown to help, that anything we do helps, so that, no time is wasted. And even recently for myself, if I have let the day slip by and I didn't make the time to meditate, I even find myself just taking a mindfulness 2 or 3 minutes to simply focus all of my thoughts on the activity that I'm doing, so that I'm, doing the dishes and noticing the colors on the plate and the temperature of the water, doing it mindfully, so that at least some of that brain space could be made. So if you already meditate, definitely just making sure you revisit your healthy habit every day. Then, of course, if you need some meditation resources, one of my favorite apps, I think, I believe, like many people I know about, because there are millions of users, is I've preferred using one called Insight Timer. A number of reasons: for its ease of use. It's just a massive library, a collection of all kinds of meditations where you can find things really tailored to what you desire in that moment. They have helpful articles and blogs, and it's a really cool community of people meditating. So Insight Timer, which you can find on all of the major operating systems. If you are listening to this podcast, you may be aware that I have a website, healingartshealthandwellness.com, and I do have a couple of meditation programs that I've created. One, a 21-day meditation journey, and then a short course on mindfulness, which if you navigate to healingartshealthandwellness.com, you'll find a tab at the top that says programs, and you can browse through there to see which resources are available. And then, of course, your friends, your family, loved ones, you can always ask them, if you know of someone that meditates, ask them, what is it that they do? So as always, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure to cover these topics, to cover it in depth. If you have comments, questions, you can shoot me an email, and I'll put my email in the link. And then, of course, there's all kinds of ways to stay up to date if you're wanting to know when new episodes come out, or if you're wanting to find my previous episodes, because the podcast has been alive with its heart beating for a little bit over a year, or maybe 2 years by now. I'll put in the show notes where you can find ways to stay up to date. It's always so much gratitude for joining me. Thank you so much. And I will see you next week, which we will be resuming a little bit of a thing we've been doing together, which is a monthly meditation. So we'll be doing our meditation for the month of January next week. Thanks so much. Until next week. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Art of Healing podcast. Once again, this is Charlize. You can find out more about me at www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. Did you know I have a blog as well as online courses? Check your show notes to sign up for more information about Healing Arts Health and Wellness. Thank you. please feel free to share this episode with your friends, family, and loved ones.